The anti-Trump protests continue as the man himself rows back on campaign slogans and insists all Americans will soon be having a great time.
Are you going to make sure that people with preconditions are still covered?
Yes, because it happens to be one of the strongest assets.
You're going to keep that?
Also, with the children living with their parents for an extended period, you're going to
keep
very
that?
much try and keep that.
Good evening. In his first interviews after his election victory, Donald Trump has gone a bit quiet on locking up Hillary Clinton and has spoken of keeping some parts of the Obamacare health reforms he railed against during the campaign. Tonight, a new protest is starting up in New York, but is the anti-Trump anger pointless? Also tonight, how pharmacists will soon be able to give out antibiotics for sore throats to free up time for doctors. Lego becomes the first major brand to stop future promotions in the Daily Mail amid a campaign against hate-filled journalism. And England continue their unbeaten rugby union run while Scotland fans end another night in tears. Now, in his first interview since becoming president-elect, Donald Trump has appeared to drastically water down his opposition to what's known as Obamacare and stated that prosecuting his opponent, Hillary Clinton, isn't a priority. That might come as news to many of his supporters who frequently chanted "lock her up" at his rallies, but may appease the crowds currently gathering in New York, gearing up for yet another night of protests. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, is in New York. Lindsay.
Krishnan, Donald Trump is in the Trump Towers, in amongst the high-rises behind me, working out his transition team and, it seems, some of his policies. Meanwhile, on the streets of New York, many people, mainly young people, are out there protesting because they don't believe a word that he's saying at the moment. They're the ones who say that whatever he says at the moment, what he said in the campaign, is really the man who he is. Now, he has given some hints about new positions and policies. He said that on Syria, he's going to be much more like the Russians. He's going to be attacking Islamic State and not making a priority out of attacking Bashar al-Assad. And interestingly, President Putin's spokesman said that the two men, Putin and Donald Trump, had a lot in common in their approach. But today, in public, what we saw was a more emollient Trump. It's a family affair. President-elect Trump's children are not only the backdrop to his first interview, but will control his businesses and be part of his transition team. He's trying to present a less combative image. 10 days ago,
Obamacare has to be replaced, and we will do it, and we will do it very, very quickly. It is a catastrophe.
And replace.
Now,
when you replace it, are you going to make sure that people with preconditions are still covered?
Yes, because it happens to be one of the strongest assets.
You're going to keep that?
Also, with the children living with their parents for an extended period, you're going to keep very much try and keep that. Adds cost, but it's very much something we're going to try and keep.
his opponent.
Such a nasty
trust
woman.
fund.
She's as crooked as they come.
But now,
So Hillary called, and it was a lovely call. And it was a tough call for her. I mean, I can imagine. Tougher for her than it would have been for me, and for me it would have been very, very difficult. She couldn't have been nicer. She just said, "Congratulations, Donald. Well done." And I said, "I want to thank you very much. You were a great competitor." She's very strong and very smart.
this morning he tweeted in the same vein, "This will prove to be a great time in the lives of all Americans. We will unite and we will win, win, win." With Washington insider Vice President-elect Mike Pence in charge of picking his team, Republicans who said Mr. Trump was potentially the most reckless president in U.S. history are rowing backwards fast.
I hope he does not become the most reckless president in American history. Obviously, now that he's president-elect, we want him to succeed, and we hope that he surrounds himself with advisors who will help keep our foreign policy and our national security policy on an even keel.
But last night, millennials were on the streets again. They say the racist, misogynistic, reckless, angry Trump is the real Trump. One of the biggest crowds was in Los Angeles. California voted overwhelmingly Democrat, and Sama only half-jokingly calling for independence. In Portland, Oregon, police fired tear gas after protesters smashed windows. Traffic was held up, and one demonstrator was injured, reportedly by someone in a car with a gun. Right now, here in New York, protesters are marching on Trump Tower. Not everyone in America thinks that deference to the winner and a show of unity is the best way to deal with their president-elect. Now, one of the things that the demonstrators are talking about is more than 200 incidents that have been reported since President-elect Trump came to be elected, and they are racist incidents and misogynist incidents in schools and colleges and other places around the country where people have been insulted using some of the same language that he used in the campaign. What they say is he should condemn this, because however calm and polite he is now, they're saying that this kind of bigoted language has been legitimized by his campaign.
Lindsay Hilson in New York. Now, President-elect Trump's Mexican wall and the future relationship with Mexico are one of the bigger issues facing his new administration. Hard on the heels of the shock election result, there were more prosaic issues involving the two countries last night, a World Cup qualifying football match. Inevitably, it was a politically charged event, which Mexico won 2-1. Inigo Gilmore was there.
The smoke has barely started to lift after this most incendiary of American election campaigns. An ugly backdrop to this match between Mexico and the United States, these days the fiercest of rivals. In his march to the White House, Donald Trump openly denigrated immigrants, calling for the mass deportation of Mexicans who he labeled as rapists, and for a wall to be built between the two countries. Underneath the mask of carnival exuberance, there was no mistaking a divisive undercurrent that belies all the talk of one team, one nation. As we talked to a group of Mexican Americans, a United States fan stepped in, parroting Trump's label of Mexicans as criminals.
They're all criminals.
In a flash, it all kicked off. Beer was thrown. It was quickly diffused, but not without some more taunting.
Nobody will take us back, not even Donald Trump. USA!
Among several fans we met who voted for Trump, there was an admission that his comments about Mexicans had been inflammatory and damaging, even if it didn't impact on their choice.
First and foremost, he wants to take care of our own country, is really what he wants to do. But the things that he says are, yes, you said it right, it's very divisive. And I think he wants to say the right things, but he doesn't have a filter is the problem.
This family from rural Ohio told me they understood why Mexicans feel hurt, but for them, an unfiltered Trump was still the best option.
It wasn't good either way. It was.
Are you voting for a stroke or a heart attack?
Yeah, pretty much. That's it.
Stroke or a heart attack?
Which one do you want?
Which one do you want?
Which one have you got?
I don't know.
We'll find out.
But Ivan, a young Mexican American from Los Angeles, told me he couldn't understand how so many Americans could bring themselves to support Trump.
I was in tears all night, and then the next morning it was an emotional day. It's kind of hard not to take those comments personally when you're kind of surrounded by people who voted for a man with kind of just who says such kind of hateful things, and kind of it's hard not to take those votes for a man like that personally. It's almost like Donald Trump is an arsonist, and all the people who voted for him gave him a match, and he's trying to burn my house down, and you kind of don't know how to take that.
Trump blazed through Ohio on his way to the White House, winning this key battleground state with large support among white men and women. With his angry rhetoric, Trump promised people here a break from the past. At the bar we met Aaron, celebrating a goal for his team and a victory for Donald Trump.
Boom! Let's go. I don't know if Trump is the answer. I don't know that, but I know we need change.
Back at the stadium, as joyous Mexican fans filtered out, celebrating a 2-1 win, some wondered what this change might bring. Born in Mexico, Martin came to the States 12 years ago. He understands the fear in the immigrant community.
There's over 11 million people here that are illegally here, and they are scared. They are scared that they might lose everything they got. They came to this country for a better life, and they're scared that tomorrow everything might be gone.
As the fans continued their celebrations, Captain America joined them.
I can't say anything political. Okay.
Many here were keen to leave politics aside and just get along. But after all the anger and viciousness of the campaign, binding the wounds will not be easy, with lingering uncertainty over whether Donald Trump will follow his words with actions.
Well, I'm joined now by Jack Kingston, the former Georgia congressman who now serves as an advisor to Donald Trump. Thank you for joining us. Has Donald Trump got a bit soft on Hillary Clinton? I mean, he said he wanted to appoint a special prosecutor, he wanted to lock her up, that she'd be in jail when he was president, and now he says it's not a priority.
Well, I don't think it is a priority. If you look at what his priorities were that he outlined, especially in Gettysburg 3 weeks ago, in terms of immigration security, repealing and replacing Obamacare, renegotiating trade agreements, lowering the taxes and simplifying the tax code, and a couple of other things. And those were really what he's going to hit the ground running with. As far as Hillary Clinton goes, justice is going to take its own course. I think you won't necessarily see, okay, investigation over with, but I think it's still going to be allowed to move along the ways that justice always does, and slowly in many cases.
Right, but he's not going to intervene by appointing a special prosecutor?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. Now, the other thing that's emerged is
Congress
the sort of... Sorry, go on.
I was saying Congress may decide, hey, look, this is something we need to look into, but I think at this point the Trump administration has got to focus on hitting the ground running with its own legislative agenda.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, isn't it? How quickly you can deliver. Now, today he's
Yes.
implying that you're going to keep some of Obamacare after all, and that it's going to be a reform rather than a repeal and a replacement. Is that going to satisfy people when you were so strong on getting rid of it during the campaign?
Well, I will say this. One thing that he and probably 100% of the members of Congress who got reelected, one thing they have in common is that they all ran on replacing and repealing and replacing. But here's the way I would describe it. The law itself was actually 7 feet high. And let's say within that 7 feet, there were 2 or 3 feet that were non-controversial that everybody agreed on, and they weren't even unique to Obamacare. I think you could say we're going to keep that part of it because that wasn't what the contention was. To most conservatives, Obamacare means the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. will now have centralized control over my health care. Their constituents want to have their health care only between them and their doctors and want to have their own control over it. And so I think anything that accomplishes that will be considered a repeal and a replacement.
I mean, the danger is that you start to look just like any other political movement, because right now what we're seeing is the party machine moving in, the congressmen and the Senate and the lobbyists and all the people that he railed against during the campaign are now putting together his new administration. He's going to end up looking like any other politician.
I think he's going to stick to his campaign promises because the theme of draining the swamp, I think it's real. He is going to have an ethics reform package, and he is going to work with members of Congress to try to get his agenda passed rather than ideas that they have, at least initially. But one thing that he and Paul Ryan have in common is that they do have a lot of issues that they want to address, such as repealing and replacing Obamacare, or immigration security, or simplifying and lowering the tax rate. So I think that there's so much in common that they have that if they focus on that, they're going to get along fine, and neither will be compromised by their philosophy.
How long do you think you've got?
Let me say.
I mean, because your constituents are going to be impatient for change quickly. They're going to want those jobs quickly. How quickly can you deliver them?
You know, we always talk in Washington about the first 100 days, and I think there's a reason for that. It's about accurate because, you know, that's about a 3-month period of time. And even before that, right now, the transition is a 7-day-a-week time period, selecting the right team. And of course, you want a team that's competent, but you also have to have a team that is loyal. There were some dark days in this campaign, and there were a lot of fair weather Republicans who ran. And those won't be the first choice, but ultimately he does want people who are transportation experts, who are experts in healthcare, who are expert in tax and trade policy, and he is going to surround himself by them, but he is going to be the quarterback. He is not going to turn over the play calling to people who weren't on the team when it really counted. They might implement some stuff, but...
I'm sorry to wind you up, but we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Jack Kingston.
Thanks for having me.
Well, at 9:30 tonight on Channel 4, do tune in to The World According to President Trump, a Dispatches special with Matt Fry. Now, the toy manufacturer Lego has announced that it has no plans to run any further promotional activity with the Daily Mail. The newspaper has been attacked for its anti-refugee positions and more recently for calling 3 judges enemies of the people after they ruled that Parliament had to be consulted before Brexit. A campaign on Facebook called Stop Funding Hate has been gathering pace very quickly, as Diana Magnay reports.
Britain's tabloid press aren't known for holding back, especially on issues like immigration. But the vicious tone of some papers last week came in for special scrutiny. The Daily Mail's branding of 3 High Court judges as enemies of the people for supposedly blocking Brexit, for many a step too far. 1,200 complaints so far to IPSO, the independent press regulator, and more are coming in. Stop Funding Hate was launched in August, asking British retailers to rethink where they advertise.
We want companies to pull their advertising from newspapers that use hate speech and extreme language, because companies are making their customers complicit. So customers are buying products of these companies, and that's funding the hate.
Today, Lego issued this statement. The agreement with the Daily Mail has finished, they say, and we have no plans to run any promotional activity with the newspaper in the foreseeable future. The campaign is now asking retailers like Marks & Spencer, John Lewis and Waitrose to consider withdrawing their funding from newspapers. And it's received celebrity support from Gary Lineker, who tweeted that he'd spoken to Walkers about its advertising choices. The Mail's response was simple. Our agreement with Lego has ended, they say, and we have no plans to run any promotional activity with Lego in the foreseeable future. Gina Miller, who brought the case on Article 50 to the High Court, is glad to see some payback for the papers, who she feels are responsible for an avalanche of hate mail, abusive phone calls, even death threats that she says she's received since the court's ruling.
It is quite disgusting that it's come from press articles that have actually, there is a direct correlation between reporting from some elements of the press to the responses that I'm getting. It's not as though it's just keyboard warriors or on social media. They're actually coming from direct responses to articles in the media.
Editors may write what it takes to sell papers, but it's a tough time for print, and they need to keep big brands on side as much as they do their readers.
The Croydon tram, which came off the rails, killing 7 people and injuring more than 50 in South London on Wednesday, has been removed from the crash site. Crews worked overnight to remove the 2 carriages from the track before they were loaded onto the back of lorries and driven away. The investigation into the cause of the accident is ongoing. Police have now named the final 3 victims as Donald Collett, Philip Logan and Robert Huxley. At least 40 people have been killed and over 100 injured in an explosion at a Muslim shrine in Pakistan. Hundreds of people were inside the Shah Noorani shrine when the blast occurred, about 100 kilometres north of Karachi in Baluchistan. The so-called Islamic State have said they carried out the attack. If you head straight to your doctor when you get a sore throat, you're not alone. Last year, 1.2 million people did the same. Now the NHS wants us to visit pharmacies first, where a simple test will show whether antibiotics will help. Here's our science editor, Tom Clark.
This one. If you think the chemist is just for picking up prescriptions, toothpaste or corn plasters, think again. The latest plan from NHS England is to get pharmacies to treat one of the biggest burdens on GPs. That's people with sore throats. It's one of a number of new initiatives to shift more of the doctor's workload onto expert pharmacists.
There's lots of things that people go to their doctor for that they don't really need to go to the doctor. They could come to the pharmacy, they could come and speak to a pharmacist, and NHS England has said it wants to do more of that and utilise pharmacies much more, which will take a huge amount of burden off general practice.
In England alone, there are around 1.2 million visits to the GP each year for sore throats. More than 60% end up with an antibiotic being prescribed, even though just 1 in 10 or fewer sore throats are actually caused by a bacterium against which antibiotics work. Under the new proposals, rather than go to your GP with a sore throat, you pop down to the chemist. If the pharmacist thinks your symptoms are those of a bacterial infection, a quick throat swab will confirm it, and they can then prescribe the antibiotic that you actually need. There's no pressure on GPs, no need for an appointment, and most importantly, no overuse of precious antibiotics. Sounds like the perfect remedy, saving patients time, the NHS money, and preventing the continuing rise of antibiotic resistance. But there's one potential catch. The government has taken a chunk out of pharmacy funding this year and next.
Unfortunately, the cuts that we've been fighting for the last 10, 11 months, fighting against the Department of Health and the government, means that it's much more difficult to be certain that we're going to have that wide network of community pharmacies up and down the country there to serve people in their local communities.
Making better use of pharmacies is seen as common sense with wide support, but it will only work if fully resourced as a service in its own right, not rushed in to alleviate the symptoms of an NHS under grave financial pressure.
Police were called to a school in the West Midlands when they received reports that a 7-year-old boy had told friends he'd brought a bullet into class. The item in question turned out to be a hollow brass cylinder. His mother, believing the incident was treated in a heavy-handed manner because the boy is Muslim, refused to let the police speak to him. Here, she tells Asad Beg about the distress the event caused her son. We agreed to protect her identity and that of her family.
What do you do when a 7-year-old boy brings in a brass cylinder to school and boasts that it's a bullet, and his older brother is an army cadet who had once held a rifle? Well, this particular school reported it to the police. The first a mother heard about the incident was when she found police waiting for her and her son with the item in hand outside their home.
I was about to sort of clarify it to him. I said it's been lying around in the house for years and tell him where it came from. However, he insisted that he didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to talk to my 7-year-old. My 7-year-old was beside me at the time, and at this point, he really panicked. He jumped up and down. He sort of said, "Can we not just leave it here, please?" And he was really upset and extremely distressed. He just didn't know what kind of trouble he was getting into. And you know, he later told me that the teachers had told him that it was just something they would talk to his parents about.
If it was reported to the police that a child had something resembling a bullet, and even if the police realised that it wasn't a bullet when they investigated, but aren't they duty bound to go through the motions and speak to the parents and speak to the child?
But it didn't resemble a bullet. It didn't to the other 7-year-olds who were playing with it resemble a bullet. The school have confirmed that they didn't think it was a bullet. So is it the fact that he mentions the word bullet means we need a police investigation? The police themselves had a chance to examine it and knew it wasn't a bullet. So what are they duty bound to investigate? Is it that as soon as any Muslim child comes on their radar, they need to go through every motion possible and probe what? What are they investigating?
The police responded with this statement.
Every report of a firearm is taken extremely seriously. Officers will always thoroughly investigate any reports of unlawful gun and ammunition that are reported in the community. We want people to feel safe and reassured that we are working around the clock to rid our streets of weapons.
What makes you think that you were singled out, or your child was singled out specifically because they were Muslim?
There's no other explanation. There's no other justification from the way the school dealt with the issue right from the outset. Now, this is in breach of their own safeguarding policy, which states that they must get the consent of parents.
Did they call you?
No, they didn't call me. They didn't ask me a question. They didn't ask me to clarify. They didn't do anything.
In a statement, the school said,
As a Catholic school, all our children are treated equally, and we pride ourselves on the diversity of our pupil intake and community. Historically, there have been disclosures made of a similar nature from children who are not from Muslim families, and the same course of action has been taken. We have apologised to the child's mother for any distress that this had caused to the family.
When a 7-year-old comes to you and says, they're doing this to me because I'm Muslim, as a parent, how do you respond to that?
I find it incredibly upsetting. To have a 7-year-old child say that, it really means that they've lost their innocent look on the world, where they feel people are treated equally. It's a really nasty lesson to learn at that particular age. I think I need a minute.
There have been classroom incidents across the country that have turned out to be nothing but innocent misunderstandings. Cases like this one bring into sharp focus some of the tensions between authorities and Muslim communities.
Sport, and in rugby's autumn internationals, England ended their losing run against South Africa in impressive fashion. But Scotland dramatically lost their game with Australia, as Jordan Jarrett-Bryan reports.
No poppy-wearing issues for the England rugby team as brothers-in-arms remembered fallen soldiers in the falling rain. England were taking on a South African team in indifferent form, but you never take the Springboks any less serious. It wasn't the start the hosts were looking for, conceding 2 early kicks to Pat Lammy. But it was England who struck the first real blow with a try just moments later. Slick ball movement sliced the visitors apart, Johnny May sending Twickenham crazy. Another try soon followed as England took control of the half and the match. A kick from Daly received the royal round of applause. 2 tries either side of a South African one meant England won their first game against the Africans in a decade. Scotland began their match well, Hugh Jones breaking away to give the Scots the lead. Australia fought back, but it was Jones again who kept his side ahead. But the Aussies were never put to bed, and a late try from Kurajani and subsequent conversion broke Scottish hearts with just moments left on the clock. Final score, Scotland 22, Australia 23.
Cricket, and an impressive half-century by teenager Haseeb Hameed has put England in a strong position against India in the first test. Here's Jack Taylor.
When we used to come to play from overseas was like winter. A superstar welcome for the superstar of Indian cricket. Virat Kohli is used to the attention. But India's captain isn't used to mistakes like this, clattering the stumps with his own foot, an important wicket for England. Adil Rashid claimed 2 more victims. Easy catch. The England spinner tricking and teasing the batsman as India were bowled out for 488. It meant England held a narrow lead, but to win the match, they needed to score quickly. Fortunately for captain Cook, Haseeb Hameed is a young man in a hurry. Playing in his first match, the teenager made Test cricket look easy. Hameed's father was born not far from the stadium. His son's first Test 50 made Dad a proud man.
Tier or 2 for Ismail.
With time in the match running out, England have the advantage. Cook and his team will return tomorrow, still with a chance of victory. And that's it as the anti-Trump protests gather pace in New York. Don't forget that special tonight, all about Trump, if you can't get enough of Trump, or maybe you can't get enough of Matt Fry. You can have them both at 9:30 tonight. We're back with the news at 6:30 tomorrow. Till then, that's Channel 4 News. Have a very good evening.